The same day, Patton's advance columns reach the southern end of the Bulge. The German 7th Army is prepared for them. Patton's tanks, accustomed to advancing miles at a stretch, are now forced to fight for every inch of land. The snow-covered muddy ground keeps the reinforcements from reaching Bastogne. The next day, December 23rd, dawns bright and sunny. Perfect flying weather. Americans in Bastogne cheer as Allied planes fly overhead to bomb and strafe the enemy. And more importantly, to drop supplies. Not all that's needed, but enough to enable the Americans to hang on.
That was a big morale builder because we needed support, and we got this support just in time to bolster our spirits. Even though we were still eating K and C rations, it was a nice holiday time.
By Christmas Eve, the battle has been raging for 10 days. But even with the bloodshed and animosity, there is still a holiday spirit.
German occupation troops would be in these French villages, and because it was Christmas and because they were lonesome, they would hand out chocolate or whatever they had, and the French would accept it, and for one night at least, the hostility was tempered. But it wasn't unique, and there are many stories like that in the history of warfare. There are lots of stories in wartime about things like this happening.
We were bivouacked, and we had taken over this little farmhouse that was deserted. And somebody said, "Boy, I'd love to have some ice cream." And I thought of, how could I make ice cream? So I filled up a helmet of snow and brought it back. I mixed it with evaporated milk and chocolate syrup and vanilla and sugar, and we had ice cream.
On Christmas Day, news reaches Bastogne that the western spearhead of the German 2nd Panzer Division has been stopped just short of the Meuse. Americans speculate that the powerful tank division might now turn back on them in full force. When Hitler is told by his generals they can't reach the Meuse, much less the English Channel, he orders the expected all-out attack on Bastogne.
What people don't realize about Bastogne is that when the Germans got to Bastogne, they bypassed it. And the actual heavy fighting at Bastogne wasn't until later, after the panzers had failed to reach the Meuse. Then they turned back to Bastogne and tried to encircle it and capture it. And of course the Americans held Bastogne. By that time they'd been reinforced. So Bastogne, while it was important, was not the whole Battle of the Bulge.
On the afternoon of December 26th, a tank unit of Patton's 4th Armored Division breaks through to Bastogne. The next day, the corridor is widened. The siege is over, but not the fighting. December 28th, a driving snowstorm grounds all planes. The Wehrmacht advances on Bastogne with 9 divisions, 4 of them armored. A great part of this effort is aimed at closing the American corridor to the south. The Americans hold on and even widen their lifeline. On January 3rd, the Allies launch a 3-pronged counterattack. The 3rd Army continues its northward drive. The 1st Army continues south, and the British 30th Corps pushes in from the west. By January 16th, patrols from the 1st and 3rd Armies meet north of Bastogne. By early February, the Germans have been pushed back to where they started.
The Battle of the Bulge destroyed the last major offensive forces that Germany had. By the end of the Battle of the Bulge, they knew they couldn't win. And from that time on, there was nobody left to fight on the Western Front. The remains of the Panzer Lehr Division was sent to the Eastern Front, where it was eventually destroyed. And with the losses in manpower, 250,000 men, it became clear that the German army no longer could fight on the Western Front.
Our tanks were going forward. We saw German tanks going the direction that we just came from, flying, and, you know, it was a bedlam. I particularly remember one tank waving to us happily, and then they realized we were Americans, and they all jumped out of the tank and got into the roadways.
Jules Berlinski would return to the United States after the war and work for a major department store in Los Angeles. It is a remarkable feat in itself for Patton's Third Army, poised to strike eastward, to turn north and race 125 miles to Bastogne in just 2 days. But more importantly, Patton's unit arrived prepared to fight immediately. Working to the American advantage is Adolf Hitler, who tells his officers that the operation is irrevocable. Through his absolute commitment to the plan, the Germans initially catch the Allies by surprise. For a brief moment, it gives them hope of a renewed victory. But in the end, the Battle of the Ardennes Forest becomes another in a long series of German defeats and the last offensive of World War II.